Number 3. Ricky Lawless. Medardo Jim Leon Jr. was born in December 1959 in Paterson, New Jersey. However, he was better known by his wrestling alias, Ricky Lawless. He also had the nickname the Cuban Assassin. His parents immigrated from Cuba shortly before he was born. When he was young, his family relocated to Montgomery County, Maryland. Lawless often got into trouble as a youth. On one occasion, neighbors saw him point a gun at his mother. On February 27, 1979, just weeks before his parents were going to finalize their divorce, his father shot his mother to death. Months later, Lawless got married for the first time. The marriage only lasted a month. For the next 6 years, he married twice more. His second wife was 15 years older than him. The marriage ended when Lawless had sex with one of her teenage daughters. Throughout the 1980s, Lawless wrestled in the independent circuit, mainly New Jersey and Georgia. He was part of a popular tag team, the Heavy Metal Connection, with Joseph Magliano, better known as Joey Meggs. His peers considered him an excellent technical wrestler. He had notable matches with legends such as Brusier Brody. His career was also notable for training other wrestlers, such as Extreme Championship Wrestling legend Axel Rodden. On the night of November 30th, 1988, Lawless was at his home in Baltimore, Maryland, with his girlfriend. At the time, he was estranged from his third wife, with whom he had a younger daughter. She left him after he struck her in the face, which split open her cheek, and tried to strangle her with a coat hanger. Shortly after 11 p.m., the doorbell chimed. Lawless went to the door and asked who was there. The person who rang the bell identified himself as Joe. Lawless started to open the door and then saw a man standing on his doorstep. He was armed with a shotgun. Lawless grabbed the barrel of the shotgun with both hands and went off. The blast blew the index finger off his left hand. Lawless was shot a second time in the chest. 27-year-old Ricky Lawless was taken to a local Baltimore hospital where he was pronounced dead on arrival. During the investigation, the police talked to neighbors, and several described a man they saw at Lawless's home. This led them to another pro wrestler, 22-year-old Ronald Hembrecht. Hembrecht and Lawless had wrestled against each other many times. On December 3rd, 4 days after the murder, Hembrecht surrendered himself to the police, but he was later released. The police suspected that 2 people were involved in the shooting. Lawless was shot in the left hand with a shotgun and shot in the chest with a different gun, a .32 caliber handgun. But they weren't sure who would have wanted to kill Ricky Lawless. They suspected it was someone with whom Lawless had a bad relationship with in the wrestling business. But this line of investigation did not lead to any more arrests. Then, a few weeks after the murder, the police got a break. 22-year-old Raymond Michael Schwartz was arrested for not returning a car from a rental lot in Saluda, Virginia. He was arrested while driving the car. In the car, the police found a shotgun and a .32 caliber handgun. Ballistic testing revealed that they were the murder weapons. Schwartz was extradited to Maryland. In custody, Schwartz told the police what happened. He was friends with 26-year-old Tommy Shalor. Shalor had been in and out of prison most of his life. Shalor had several girlfriends, and one of them said that Lawless had been harassing her. She wanted Shalor to take care of it. Schwartz said on the night of the murder, he and Shalor went to Lawless's home. Schwartz was armed with a shotgun, and Shalor had the .32 caliber handgun. Schwartz said he rang the doorbell, and when Lawless opened the door and saw the shotgun, he tried to wrestle the gun away. Schwartz fired the gun, and it blew off Lawless's finger. Then Shalor came and shot him in the chest. The police's next step was to find Tommy Shalor, but he was nowhere to be found. On January 26, 1989, 2 months after the shooting, 26-year-old police officer Barry Schweitzer was responding to a call about a possible drug sale in Baltimore. When he arrived in the area, he looked around on foot. Suddenly, someone came up behind him and took his gun out of his holster. There was a struggle, and the assassin shot him in the abdomen. The shooter was arrested at the site by responding officers, and Schweitzer was taken to the hospital. The shooter was identified as 26-year-old Tommy Shallor. Schweitzer survived his wound. Months later, in May 1989, Shallor died in custody while awaiting charges of attempted murder of a police officer. His death was labeled as suicide. Raymond Schwartz was given 15 years for shooting Ricky Lawless. The public records of the crime he was convicted of could not be found. What is known is that he was to serve his sentence concurrently with a 20-year sentence for robbing a convenience store of $80 days before Lawless was murdered. Raymond Schwartz's current whereabouts and status are unknown. Number 2. Gentleman Chris Adams. Christopher Adams was born in Rugby, England in 1955. As a youngster, Adams was a multi-sport athlete, often competing in rugby and amateur wrestling. But the sport he excelled at was judo. He won national and international titles. In 1976, he was part of the English judo Olympic team, but did not compete. While living in England, he made his professional wrestling debut in 1978. He did not have any professional wrestling training. Instead, he relied on his judo skills. In 1980, he was again an English judo Olympic team member. He returned to the Olympics in 1984 and again won silver. Adams moved to the U.S. in 1983. In Dallas, Texas, he wrestled with Fritz von Erich's World Class Championship Wrestling, also known as WCCW. WCCW was one of the most popular promotions in the 1980s. Fans gathered in Dallas's famed Sportatorium every Friday night for matches. Fritz von Erich's sons were the promotion's biggest attractions. The Von Erichs were the subject of the 2023 film The Iron Claw. Fritz appreciated Adams' athletic background. Adams was also a fan favorite. The promotion used his British accent to create the gentleman Chris Adams character. His technical abilities and legitimate athleticism helped him stand out in one of the hottest periods of professional wrestling. His unique mix of judo and pro wrestling helped him accelerate his career. Adams incorporated judo kick into his repertoire, a move now known as a super kick, which is more commonplace today. Adams feuded with Jimmy Garvin for the Texas title throughout the summer of 1983. In 1984, Adams worked with Gino Hernandez as part of the tag team, the Dynamic Duo. The much-loathed Gary Hart managed them. The pair was the most hated team in the promotion and one of the most successful. They won the WCCW tag titles. The Dynamic Duo drew large crowds while feuding with the Von Erich brothers. Unfortunately, the tag team ended after the death of Gino Hernandez in 1986. He died at age 28 from a cocaine overdose. Adams found success as a singles performer. He won the WCCW heavyweight title, beating Ravishing Rick Rude on July 4, 1986. Adams worked at WCCW until 1986. He left after an altercation at an airport. During a flight delay, an inebriated Adams was refused more alcohol. He headbutted one of the co-pilots 3 times and punched a male flight attendant. FAA agents and another wrestler, Kevin Von Erich, had to restrain Adams. Adams was sentenced to 3 months in jail and fined $500. After his release, Adams joined the Universal Wrestling Federation, aka UFW, wrestling under promoter Bill Watts. Adams worked with and against Terry Taylor, winning the promotion's tag titles and feuding over the United States title. Over the next few years, Adams split his time between UFW and WCCW, which merged with the Continental Wrestling Association and became the United States Wrestling Association, aka USWA, where he worked as a trainer. Adams also opened his own school, the Gentleman Chris Adams School of Personalized Professional Wrestling Coaching. One of the trainees at the school was a big hit from Texas named Steve Williams. Williams would become Stone Cold Steve Austin, one of the biggest names in professional wrestling history. The USWA closed in 1991, leaving Adams in limbo. Adams spent his time training and selling wrestling rings. The years weren't generous to Adams. His heavy drinking was catching up to him. He was arrested twice for DUIs. In 1989, he was put on probation for assaulting his second wife, Toni Allen. The couple eventually divorced. But there were some bright spots during the mid-90s. Adams worked as an assistant coach for Britain's judo team during the 1996 Olympics. In 1997, he signed with World Championship Wrestling, also known as WCW. He worked with William Regal as part of the Blue Bloods, a stable of wrestlers who pretended to be English aristocrats. While he wasn't a huge star in WCW, he wrestled there when pro wrestling was a pop culture phenomenon. He left WCW in 1999. In April 2000, Adams and his girlfriend of 4 months, 30-year-old Linda Kapingas, were drinking and taking the drug GHB. The drugs put Kapingas into a coma, and Adams had to call for an ambulance. 12 hours later, Kapingas was dead. Adams was charged with manslaughter a year later, facing 20 years of prison if convicted. He pleaded not guilty. While on bail, waiting to go to trial, on October 7, 2001, Adams visited a former roommate and friend, Brent "Boo Ray" Parnell, in Waxahachie, Texas. Parnell had known Adams for almost 11 years. He worked as a promoter, and he was close friends with Adams, even acting as the best man for one of Adams' weddings. Close to 1 a.m., Parnell called 911. When the police arrived, Parnell was holding a gun, and 46-year-old Gentleman Chris Adams was dead. Parnell explained that he and Adams had been drinking, listening to music, and talking about wrestling. Parnell said that the two were roughhousing, and things got out of control. Adams started swinging furniture at him. Parnell said that Adams started choking him, and he feared for his life. He grabbed his handgun from a nightstand. He wanted to shoot Adams in the shoulder, but he ended up shooting him in the chest. Parnell claimed he acted in self-defense. Parnell was arrested for murder. In January 2002, the grand jury heard the case to determine if Parnell would be indicted for murder. At the grand jury hearing, several people from Adams' life testified. This included his former manager, Gary Hart, Kevin Von Erich, and his widow. Many of them said that Adams got violent when he was drunk. The grand jury decided that Parnell had acted in self-defense and chose not to indict him for murder. Number 1. Brusier Brody. Brusier Brody was one of the wildest pro wrestlers of all time. In a circus-like atmosphere that thrives on chaos, Brody was one of the most chaotic. His matches closely resembled street fights, with fellow wrestlers and fans running for their lives. Brody was born Frank Donald Goodish in 1946 and grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Before pro wrestling, Brody excelled at football. He played college football at West Texas State University. Brody also played in the NFL with the Washington Redskins from 1969 to 1971. After his football career, Brody took up professional wrestling. He was around 6'8" and weighed over 300 pounds, so his size and athletic ability gained attention. He started his career as Frank the Hammer Goodish, but rechristened himself Brusier Brody in 1976. Brody wrestled worldwide, not staying in any particular territory for too long. Throughout his career, Brody wrestled in the American Wrestling Alliance, the the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, which is now World Wrestling Entertainment, the Von Erichs World Class Championship Wrestling, and various National Wrestling Alliance territories in the United States. He had a fierce rivalry with Abdul the Butcher, where the two's bloody battles enthralled fans. Brody's trademark wild man look, complete with a swinging chain, furry boots, and scarred forehead, made him stand out. His matches were often all-out brawls where he and his opponent wrestled in the crowd. Fans and peers considered him a pioneer in the hardcore style of wrestling that took off in the 90s. During his career, he feuded with the top names in pro wrestling, such as Ric Flair, Dory Funk, Terry Funk, the Von Erichs, Andre the Giant, and Bruno Sammartino. Brody was truly an international star, wrestling in most corners of the world. Notably, he was a mainstream star in Japan. He formed a tag team with Stan the Lariat Hansen in Japan, and they were a dominant force in All Japan Wrestling. Brody eventually jumped ship to New Japan Wrestling to battle Japanese wrestling icon Antonio Inoki. Brody's wrestling persona was a wild and violent man. But outside the ring, Brody was a much different person. He was known to be quiet, intelligent, articulate, and a good businessman. He was also a devoted family man with a wife and son at home. But Brody was not always the easiest talent to work with. He often butted heads with promoters and sometimes refused to lose because he thought it would make his character look weak. Something that Brody took very seriously was getting paid on time. In 1988, Brody was working for Puerto Rico's World Wrestling Council. On July 16, 1988, Brody was getting ready for a match at an arena in Baymayon, Puerto Rico. Jose Gonzalez, who was wrestling under the name Invader No. 1, asked Brody to discuss some business in the showers. Gonzalez reportedly had a towel covering his hand. When Brody entered the showers, Gonzalez stabbed him multiple times. The attack stemmed from earlier incidences where Gonzalez felt disrespected by Brody. Brody didn't like working with Gonzalez and thought he was a punk. He often humiliated Gonzalez in the ring. At the time, Gonzalez was being groomed to be one of the top stars in Puerto Rico. No witnesses saw the stabbing, but the entire dressing room heard two screams. Another wrestler, Tony Atlas, rushed to the showers and saw Brody holding a stomach and Gonzalez holding a knife. Chaos erupted in the dressing room. Dirty Dutch Mantel entered the scene a few minutes later. He later wrote in a blog post, "Brody was conscious, and as I looked closer, I could see a stab wound about an inch long and deep, with air bubbles escaping from it. Much later, the doctor told me that meant that the blade had pierced the lung." Brody was telling promoter Carlos Colon to take care of his family. Due to heavy traffic surrounding the venue, it took paramedics an hour to get to Brody. When an ambulance arrived, paramedics could barely lift Brody into the back of the ambulance. Tony Atlas, known for his impressive physique, lifted Brody into the ambulance. Brody was taken to the hospital where a medical team operated on him twice. Tragically, 44-year-old Brusier Brody died of internal blood loss around 5:40 a.m. The police that were on the scene didn't take the stabbing seriously. They thought it was part of the show. American wrestlers in the card shouted at the police to arrest Gonzalez, but they didn't understand the orders or flat out ignored them. During the chaos, fellow wrestlers attempted to keep Gonzalez at the scene. He later re-emerged with a different shirt and conducted business as usual. After the police realized that Brody had died, Gonzalez was arrested and charged with murder. He went to trial in January 1989. He pleaded self-defense. The trial was controversial as many accused the court of covering up the murder. The prosecution had no witnesses. Many of the prosecution witnesses were given the incorrect time to appear in court. Other witnesses, like Tony Atlas and Dutch Mantel, who were at the scene of the murder, received their subpoenas after the trial was over. It turned out that they were mailed out after the trial started. After a 3-day trial, Gonzalez was acquitted of all charges. He continued to wrestle in Puerto Rico until 2006. Brusier Brody's death and subsequent cover-up put a dark spot in an otherwise brilliant career. In 2019, the WWE inducted Brusier Brody into the Legacy Wing of their Hall of Fame. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Please don't forget to check out our new channel, Paranormally Listed. There's a link on the screen now, and there's a link in the description box below this video. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.